The curtain has come down on a wonderful Ashes series. The 212th men are back. We're here to unpack it all. Stuart Broad's retired. We look at the best players of the tournament. We look at some of the players that perhaps didn't achieve what was set out. But what's one thing for sure? Was it better than 2005? We don't know. I'm Rob Taylor. This is George Bottomley. We're the 212th men. A very good evening to you. And a good evening to you, George Bottomley.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Was it better than 2005?
I think it was.
I reckon.
Yeah. I felt sorry for you when we did after we did the live show on the Friday. Thank you for everyone that joined. You seemed a little bit subdued in the pub. I don't know, you kind of felt like a kid on Christmas Day, where sort of hanging on to those final few hours. You were feeling almost a bit of an Ashes come down. You thought it started drawing to its conclusion. Describe those feelings to me.
I think ever since Old Trafford, it felt like a bit of a damp squib. It felt like it had just petered out on that final day at the Oval. I did feel kind of nonplussed almost. Obviously, I wanted us to stop them getting a win in England after 20 odd years or however long it's been. But I wasn't that bothered. It felt like it had kind of gone. Old Trafford had kind of fizzled out the series and somehow, and it was just kind of looking to the future almost for me. Seeing Broad off.
I absolutely held that record dear. The 2002 thing, Australia not winning a series here since 2002. I thought we had to defend it at all costs. That was my motive behind it. And we did, triumphantly somehow with a few dodgy ball changes and a bit of stroke of luck and massive performances from certain individuals, which we'll come on to later in the show.
Yeah.
We find ourselves obviously now a couple of days out from the final test, which concluded. I don't know about you, but we were talking about this downstairs. I felt like Sky were very much almost like budgeted on this. It didn't, in regards to how the sort of fallout of the end of series has always been. It's always felt a little bit longer than this, but we saw a handful of interviews, a bit of a presentation, and then a Sky sort of montage, and we were done.
Yeah, I think that kind of mirrors how I felt about the end of that game. Is it all just felt a little bit like nobody was completely satisfied. Pat Cummins certainly wasn't satisfied.
Australia looked pretty flawed to me about that, right? I think they were really disappointed with that, weren't they?
Yeah, it was their generational kind of peak, wasn't it? Could they win the World Test Championship and then could they win a abroad Ashes, an away Ashes? They haven't achieved the second of those two objectives. I think they will be gutted. I think an Ashes win away from home would have meant more to them than the World Test Championship final would have. And they probably won't go down as one of the great Australian sides now because of that.
Yeah, we'll come on to, I guess, an overall summary of the overall series, looking at all the games and all the test matches, if you like. But I just want to quickly focus on this Oval Test spot and what obviously we saw there. We saw another sort of inspired batting performance, particularly from England's two openers, to put England in a substantial position, I guess, going into this. Obviously Australia won the toss. There's something about Australia winning the tosses at Oval which doesn't seem to go their way, does it?
Yeah.
But how did you find? What were you impressed with? What you saw, particularly from Zach Crawley, I guess?
Yeah, Crockett, Crawley, and Duckett.
Is that your christened name for them?
Yeah, are the mainstays now. I was just telling you before this pod started. Average partnership is 50 currently. The average partnership of Strauss and Cook was 41.
Pencil,
obviously a larger sample size for Strauss and Cook, but it shows that there's something to kind of back here.
Yeah.
This little and large combination, Heskey and Owen, as I've kind of dubbed them. They seem to be perfect foils for each other, and we need to take this forward and build on it. They coming into the series, that's what everyone talked about with England, the fragility of that top three.
Yeah.
Crawley, Duckett, and Pope.
Yeah.
Obviously, Pope didn't make it much
past the second
test.
Yeah.
But Crawley and Duckett have answered a lot of critics. Crawley's shown that he can play the best bowlers around. And Duckett's probably shown himself to be a bit of a dasher. I do see Duckett as almost our David Warner. Busy.
You said that, haven't you?
Probably won't come off every innings. He's not going to be the most consistent in the world. Neither of them will be. But I do think Duckett really gets you going, gets an innings going.
The kind of ingredients of that opening partnership as well is kind of a bit of the best of both worlds, because you've got Crawley, who's got this sort of like cat's lives kind of approach to being selected, just completely, have almost been given a license just to say no matter how bad you do, we're going to persevere with you because we believe you can produce the spectacular,
Yeah.
which has been proven absolutely right this Test series. And Ducky, I suppose, is the kind of county stalwart, done it for many years, captained various sides, participated in several formats. A real good sort of stock, if you like, when it comes to looking at England's domestic structure. So you've got a county stalwart in there, and you've got someone that they believe has got inner ability which can exceed anything that they can see from county form.
Yeah, it feels like in many ways the Duckett's personality past went before him for a long time, and there was that alleged pouring of the pint over Jimmy Anderson that seemed to curtail his career.
Yeah.
Well, he's gone away, he's proven himself in county championship cricket, and he's come back and he's transposed his performances in county cricket straight onto the Test scene.
Yeah. He took a lot of pressure off the likes of Root and Brook, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I think them guys have a very different series if the openers don't perform as well.
Yeah. And now we've got probably 7-8 batsmen for the first time, if you include Folks in a potential top 7, who are all vying for spaces, got good records, got good recent records, and we're starting to have something where we've got competition for places instead of the merry-go-round we had when we had Lees, Hamid, Sibley, Burns, that kind of era of opening partnerships. I think no good Test side will get very far, or you can't be a good Test side without having a strong opening partnership.
For sure.
So, moving on. Wokes and Ali.
Chris Wokes. Call Wokes the wizard, don't they?
Yeah. Brought the back on the final day. It was supposed to be broad script written by himself, but he needed some help from his friends in Moeen Ali and Chris Wokes. What do you think of that spell?
Chris Wokes has been simply sensational, hasn't he, since he came into the squad. I mean, we all know what he's capable of in England. I think, I don't know, there's always the temptation of Broad and Anderson, hasn't he? I think with a lot of with the sort of narratives that were coming out this Test match, it was, it's proven to be, and we'll come on to Stuart Broad's retirement shortly, but losing one of the two, you've called it, by the way, on Stuart Broad.
Yeah, I told you.
But obviously, I think he's always, like you said, he's always been the Andy Murray in the kind of cricketing world, hasn't he? He lives in a world where there's a Djokovic and a Nadal, and a Federer, and that's what Chris Wokes has come up against. But he's shown once again how potent he is in England. And from speaking to people, outside of England, there's a lot of people are very wary of Chris Wokes and what he can do in England. And I think, seeing what he was performed in certainly since he came into the Test match at Headingley to where he is now, he played a part where, and I think you summarised this to me on WhatsApp, it was a kind of broad spell, wasn't it? The England were in a bit of a precarious position. It looked like Australia were going to not coast home, but they were really putting the foot down into when Head and Smith were obviously coming down. Then all of a sudden there's a bit of a ball change, and there's Chris Wokes and bowling quite, for all that there's been a lot said, hasn't there, for pace and bounce and bumping people. Chris Wokes bowled line and length.
Yeah.
And it proved to be really successful ploy. Who knew that could still work?
Yeah. The romantic in me kind of drew symmetry between 2009 when Broad burst onto the scene with a 5-foot. It was Flintoff's last match. Broad very much won that game for England that day, on the final day at the Oval, and Flintoff chipped in with a slung sidearm run out of Ponting.
Yeah.
It felt like 14 years later, it was almost very similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
Wokes had to break the back, and the old stalwart came in and took the last 2 wickets to win the game.
I think we've got, just going back to Wokes, I think with Broad retiring now, it kind of almost stamps his place in the team. I think there's always been a kind of, I think a lot of admiration for Wokes in every cricket system. I think every management, every captain has always never doubted his abilities. But I kind of feel this was a little bit of a watershed moment in the transition of Broad's exit, where it's almost like the King Charles kind of thing, isn't it? Waited a long time. You feel like next time around, next home series for sure, the first sort of seam bowler's name on the sheet is Chris Wokes.
Yeah, I think Robinson and Wokes are the home opening bowlers, aren't they? Really?
Yeah.
You can't. They have to be
Anderson,
the ones.
Anderson, subject to fitness, probably.
Yeah, but if we're saying let's look beyond the Broad and Anderson years, let's say that Anderson plays in India, has 2 Test matches next summer, and goes out at Old Trafford. I'm not saying that that's what he'll do, but let's put that as a hypothesis. Robinson and Wokes need to be your opening bowling partnership in England, I think. And he's kind of ruled himself out from doing away Test matches. He said in the post-match interview that he saw himself as a home specialist now, wants to play all formats. I don't think that that's a bad approach from England, really.
For sure. Looking at some of the other performers, obviously Moeen Ali, famously, this will be back in Ashes folklore, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jack Leach goes down, back stress, back spasm,
Yep.
out the whole series, and a WhatsApp message is exchanged to Moeen Ali. Where do you sort of, talk about this test first? Where do you sort of see his whole series as a whole?
So you want this test first?
This test first, and then
Right.
just probably give a little bit on Moeen Ali.
In some ways, I think you could probably say this test sums up the whole series, really. Goes down very early on with a groin injury.
Mhm.
Doesn't look good. Didn't field for most of Australia's first innings, and then comes out and smashes a few, completely changes his approach from the first innings to the second innings with a bat. And in the final innings, obviously spin was going to play a major part of England trying to get Australia out. Just kind of shoulders up, gets on with it.
Played to fields well.
Yep, plays.
Cummins' wicket, I thought, was a pretty identifiable one. Not an amazing delivery, but kind of almost like the temptation that he's had over the years. From people think he's got a loose ball in, and he's actually a lot more control than you think. I thought, in England's time of need, he did a stellar job. Really, there's times where Australia probably had the upper hand in the first test or so. I think at Edgbaston he bowled a few loose balls, but he hadn't played. He had the finger injury, didn't he? But he's obviously, he's not the young man. Obviously, he was when he was first introduced to the England setup all those years ago. I remember him absolutely ripping through India. Do you remember his sort of debut home series? He's obviously carrying. He plays a lot of cricket these days. He's older. His body isn't built up to do what it used to be able to do. So, he kind of had to sort of glue them together at times, didn't he? But he come home good.
Yeah, I think he's underrated, and I think sometimes his commitment to the side can be underestimated as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that final test was a real showing of that, and showed that not only did he come out of retirement and put his neck on the line for England, but then he played for Pain in the final test.
I totally think he's done now. Do you?
Yeah,
I sensed the sort of how jaded he was in his interview a little bit. Kind of, he almost seemed relieved it was done in a good way. He's pleased. I think he contributed to England drawing the series, but he kind of almost said a little bit like, I'm done with this now.
Yeah, I think
because they must have worked some miracles to get him back on the field bowling, because that groin was proper. I mean, I've pulled groins myself from running and stuff, and it's a bad one. You know what I mean? For getting about,
and not even that, just bowling a spell and bowling it was a high test match spell, really. What do you get? 3 for 60 or something?
Yeah.
I think Stokes said that he'd have a conversation with Ali to see if he could tempt him for India, but yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that's going to happen. It looks like he'll re-retire, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Ali's found himself a nice little niche in terms of being Butler's right-hand man with the white ball stuff, second spinner. He'll be pivotal in the World Cup.
He's probably put some of his Australia anxieties to bed as well a little bit. He had that good performance at was it the Headingley or was it Headingley? A really good batting performance.
Old Trafford, he got 54.
Yeah, 54 at Old Trafford coming in there. Obviously, with this bowling spell now, it's always been talked about how he probably doesn't come off as well against Australia than other nations. And I think knowing that he's obviously kept England's long-term sort of record against not lose against Australia intact, I think that'll carry a lot of comfort for him, and he'll make his peace with that.
Yeah, I think in some ways, I heard his stats. I think his batting average was around 25 to 28 in this series. His bowling average was about 50. It's very much similar to what his...
You'd have taken it, wouldn't you?
What his career stats have been, but in the big moments, he's shown up. Old Trafford batting at 3, he showed up to bat with Crawley. And then on the final day at the Oval, he got 3 crucial wickets.
He's rated really highly by his team as well. You can tell both as a cricketer and what he's achieved and his abilities. I think took a lot of captain responsibility in white ball, hasn't he? So I think he's been a useful man to have around the dressing room.
Yes, and this test, moving on, this test wasn't without controversy. It wouldn't be this Ashes series without controversy. 2 points of controversy. First one, I think he's a lot less controversial than the next. Stokes' drop, out or not out for you?
It was not out.
Yeah.
I've said this to you downstairs. I think if he actually looked more convincing and he on his way down, he threw it up in the air and jumps around and hugged people, he might have stood a chance, but he looked as guilty as sin.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I think Joe Root actually tried to tell him it was out that he just sort of almost went, yeah, it's out. You know what I mean?
Well, he didn't even almost do that, did he? He just reviewed it.
Yeah.
He just thought, let him have a look at it. I think in some ways, though, after all the kerfuffle that English cricket made about the Bairstow thing and the spirit of cricket,
kind of thought we'll try and get away with, we'll try and even it up a little bit.
no, different to that.
I think it's just not worth pursuing.
I'm saying I think it would have been a bit of a bad look if Stokes had really tried claiming it. You know, he evidently thought it wasn't out himself.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't really pressurise the umpires. He reviewed it just to check. It wasn't out. Yeah. Everyone moved on. I think that was fair enough. Second controversy, probably a bit more turbulent, political, toxic. Ricky Ponting's asking for a ball change. An investigation into the ball change. What do you reckon to that?
It's funny. I thought we were the whingers.
Yeah. Well,
I think what comes about all this, and I'll give my views on the ball in a minute, but for all people saying whinging, you know, England wanted to put a roof on the stadium after Old Trafford, I just think people generally don't like losing that much or don't like not getting what they want.
Yeah.
And that'll always bring out something like that. When it comes to investigations, I think you've done a little bit more thorough research on this, but to me, there's definitely times where I can recall Australia, New Zealand, India, whichever nation you want. And if this means there's grey areas in this area of the game, then so be it. But there's times where that has actually hindered England, where England have been on the receiving end of that. You know, a team like Australia will be forthcoming with things like light. I mean, Marnus Labuschagne was walking off after his dismissal, saying it's really dark.
Yeah.
You know, players will push the boundaries and try and push the umpires into decisions. And it wasn't happening for England. It's very much a case of where the game's at now. You can ask for a ball change. This ball did more than the old ball. It looked newer than the current ball for sure. But I kind of think these things are just kind of part of the game.
Yeah.
You've got a little bit more to give on this, haven't you?
Yeah, so I've been watching all the various podcasts and stuff like
all
that.
All the ball podcasts.
Yes, reading newspapers and all the rest of it, doing my research.
Have you dissected a Dukes yet?
I've not dissected a Dukes yet.
That could be your next experiment.
But in my thorough research, I've learned that if a ball comes out of the batch, which is supposed to be 38 overs old, to mirror the overage of the ball that they're replacing, it will only have been bowled with.
So it's not been like used by Australia at Edgbaston, has it? It won't be like that was the ball from the 30th or 38th over.
My interpretation is you get a shed load of balls. Yeah. The Oval say right to their net bowlers.
Jamie Overton,
start of the winter, right? Bowl with these.
Warm up.
Keep track of how many balls you bowled with them, and then we'll put them in the box.
Yeah.
And so I think they're always going to be newer because of that. England were trying to get that ball to reverse swing, so they were trying to scuff it up.
Scuffing.
Can you take that? Can you take that kind of context into it? Do you have to start taking? Does it become completely an eye measurement rather than a 38 overs for 38 overs match? I agree with you that it's almost like offsides, bad decisions in football, that kind of cliche that they'll even themselves up over time.
Khawaja wasn't happy, was he?
No. I think
Khawaja's saying we worked our arse off to get us this position. You know, there's also a bit of like, you know, coming out of interval, bit of a breakthrough, one wicket. I don't think all of the wickets, from what I can see, were directly relatable to the fact of the ball.
Yeah.
I think you have to credit Chris Woakes.
Yeah.
You have to credit the England bowlers, you know, the tactics, the fields, you know.
I do think with Khawaja, he almost needs to take up a job at the ICC, doesn't he, after he finishes? Because he's got
for a suit and tie job, doesn't he?
He's got a lot of ideas about the rules all the way through the series. He's
a rough time, Khawaja, hasn't he?
But yeah, I'm not. I don't know. We're on the winning side. We got the rub of the green with the new ball.
Would he have complained if Australia got a ball change and we'd lost 10 wickets in a section?
That's the thing that I think they need to clamp down on is the amount of asking. So apparently in the county championship you can ask twice, and if you get rejected twice, you don't ask again.
That seems a pretty fair rule.
Seems like a decent rule.
Yeah.
Because it does get ridiculous. I remember listening.
They pull out these sort of like cheap handcuffs, don't they?
Yeah.
And kind of bring those out. And I still sometimes watch them doing that. The umpire, I almost think that could have got through, just not really forceful enough. Do you agree?
And then sometimes it looks like it stops, and then they force it through a bit more.
And Khawaja kind of made out like it was almost like some tin pot system where Joe Wilson saying this is the only ball left, as if like you've got some club cricket side and they found an old kookaburra in the sawdust near the roller.
Well, I think that's what Khawaja's alleging is that Joe Wilson said that was the best match they could get. There wasn't really a ball that was comparable.
Yeah.
Which I can understand Khawaja's frustrations. I think it's one of these things.
This one's been in the microwave.
Yeah. I think throughout this series we've seen a lot of the time it's frustration with the laws of the game rather than
There's like we said, Test cricket is a wonderful product. This has been a great demonstration of it. But as Gerard Kimber says, it's constantly evolved, and don't be surprised in the next 5-10 years to see minor alterations to things around this. Right, I'd like to talk about Stuart Broad.
Yes.
It's quite difficult for me. I think, me and you coming up to our 30th birthdays next year. Yes, we obviously, we're children of the 2005 series and products of that as a result for our allegiance to Test cricket. I find it's going to be very difficult for me to accustom to an England Test side without Stuart Broad leading the attack in England.
Yeah, it was really interesting that when they played the montage when he announced his retirement, I found it almost kind of a journey through my cricketing watching life in terms of obviously
school, college,
2005,
20s.
Yeah, 2005 was obviously the birth of most of our generation's kind of cricket love.
Mm-hmm.
But I think 2009 is when it really became cognizant, and it wasn't just the first embers of kind of our relationship with it.
England building a pretty formidable side,
And when I think back to that 2009 Ashes, it was that 5 for 37 spell from Broad that announced his arrival, and then you go through them, don't you? You think, where was I when 8 for 15 at Trent Bridge? I think I was.
That's the gesture, isn't it?
Yeah,
the Kevin McAllister kind of gesture.
Yeah, exactly that. I can see that. That's first year of uni. Then you think to what other spells he had? He had Johannesburg.
Yeah.
He obviously bowled some brilliant spells this series.
I think a lockdown Stuart Broad. There's a lockdown version.
Yes, there is. There's that famous West Indies interview where he'd been left out.
Yeah.
And he was fuming in the commentary box,
yeah.
Pulling no punches. You can almost go through the storied career, whether it's going back to his 169 at Lords. You can remember all of those moments, and it really is kind of like you say. It's hard to kind of think of a world without Broad, almost, isn't it?
He's what I describe as a great England patriot, isn't he? I think he's represented England so well at international level for so many years. He's very relatable. He's very proud of where he comes from. Nottingham lad, supports Nottingham Forest, big obsession with Test cricket, self-proclaimed. Yeah. And you obviously called it a bit earlier, but so I'd be interested to know where the origins of your sort of thoughts came from. But I sort of listened to Stuart Broad when he was interviewed saying, I'm obsessed with Ashes cricket. I'm obsessed with test match cricket. I think he just thought, right now, I'm bowling well. I'm still bowling 84 miles an hour. I'm taking wickets. I'm playing against Australia. This is peak. Nothing after this is better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You could argue, does he hang on for the next Ashes? But, like many people, not the best of times over there. It's not always going to end in happy endings, is it?
He'd be 39.
Yeah, and I think he like you said, I think he even later said that he didn't want to go out on a whimper where he's finished, and he says he wants to go out on a high, and go out on a high he did. But what was your thoughts around this? What was prompting this? I mean, I'm guessing you don't know Stuart Broad, so that you can't have had a tip off of a family member or someone that you know. What was giving you the hunch?
I think in some ways, like we say, Broad's been around our whole cricketing watching career. You know what makes Broad tick? It's the big series, it's the big Ashes, it's achieving major milestones in Test cricket.
It's them rhythms he gets into. Has there been many better rhythm bowlers? Once he gets on a flurry, you see him running down the celeb appeals.
You're going to let me answer your question?
Yeah.
So it's 2.5 years till the Ashes. He's just got past 600 wickets. It's West Indies and Sri Lanka next year. I just felt like that was never Broad, was it? Imagine Broad next summer. Anderson will probably go a little bit longer, try and get past Warne, I think, and then retire. It just felt like natural time for Broad. Go on, do you want to do a bit of a monologue on Broad?
So the flurry of wickets, the headband, the celeb appeals,
celeb
appeal, that kind of thing. All these kind of things have sort of crept into Broad, and I think, many times he's enjoyed playing a little bit of a villain. So to us, obviously, he's a hero, but overseas, obviously, Australia saw him as the bloke who obviously thick edge Ashton Agar to Michael Clarke that Aleem Dar didn't give out. I've been to Australia. He used to get absolute pelters every time it comes on, booze.
Yeah,
you'd see the sort of progression of like the mustached, flowery shirt, bucket hat Australian throughout the day, where they just endless pints, and the boom would sort of transcend into murmurs towards the end. He
Yeah.
got it all day long, and I think eventually, a little bit like probably where we're at with David Warner, who I'd like to have a little bit of a word on after this, because he's also we're saying goodbye to certainly David Warner in England. I think you grow to sort of love the phantom villain in the end, don't you? And I think actually even Australians are at a point now where they appreciate Broad for the player that he's been.
Yeah, I think Broad's often been put forward as a bowler of great spells rather than a great bowler. I think as he comes to his end of his career, that's a tag that's starting to diminish. People are starting to give him the respect that he is a great bowler.
Yeah.
At the start of the series, I probably wrongly called him a caricature in terms of his headband and, some of the histrionics that he carries on with. But that's all part of it, isn't it? There's almost, you think of the Cantona collar, these sporting icons that kind of transcend the sport that they play. They become a bit of a rock star. I mean, I know that I said to you before he finished up when he announced his retirement. It's rare that people get to choose their retirement on the biggest stage. We talked about Elton John at Glastonbury this year. What a fun, monumental performance that was, and what a monumental moment that was in kind of English culture, English music. This felt like very similar kind of thing. Is a guy at the end of his career saying, "I'm going to go out on the biggest stage. I'm going to go out playing the hits." He changed those bails. He's created his own Ashes legend there. That'll happen probably every Ashes series.
Is he painting the sort of round the wicket to left-handers kind of thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just, those final 2 wickets were 2 left-handers angling in, seaming away. It was perfect, really. It was the perfect ending, really.
It was. Certainly be missed. But I think we're going to see Stuart Broad, like we've always said. He's been groomed a long time to become a Sky sort of pundit. And I think, being honest, if you look at that Sky sort of portfolio, if you like, I think it needs a little bit of a respite from the 90s, doesn't it? It's a very 1990s kind of commentary team. Not that there's anything wrong with the 1990s, but it would be nice to have someone from a more of a relevant. I mean, for instance, I've really enjoyed Owen Morgan.
Yeah,
because he's given the kind of a bit of a, still knows some of these players, knows what's going through the head, understands changes in cricket, and I think Broad will add a lot to that. Do you agree?
Yeah. Well, somebody asked me earlier in the series what makes Broad so good, and at the time I said he's just a winner. It's all determination, and I think I'd probably refine that answer as we listen to his kind of post-series
talking about data,
talking about the amount of analysis he goes into, thinking about where his weaknesses are, thinking about how he can improve them. A real kind of thinker of the game. So I think he'll be perfect for the commentary box. Right, should we move on?
Yeah. Let's just sort of wrap up this whole series a little bit and just give our immediate reaction to it all. So, look, you can. There's so many. I think I've done a lot of sort of like in my role, been put on all the sales courses you can think of, and what they always say about negotiation and things like that. They always go, "It's a good deal if both parties walk away and thought they actually could have got more out of it." And I think that's what actually summarises why this was such a good series at 2-all, because I think both teams will look at it from the angles of England might go, well, if the rain didn't save Australia at Old Trafford, we could have carried that momentum into the Oval and won 3-2. We won the Test match. Australia will probably think there was times in Headingley where they could have had this game dead and buried. If Nathan Lyon played, would they be able to have held back Ben Stokes from dragging England back into the game?
Yeah.
There's so many ifs and buts. We've heard other podcasts talk about the fact that, well, if this hadn't gone this way, that means everything else would have stayed the same. Butterfly effect happening in cricket. It just kind of, on reflection, to me, 2 massive heavyweights going at it, 2 different takes and philosophies on cricket. I kind of agreed with where when both captains sort of consolidated and sort of said, 2-2 is a fair result. But where did you think it fitted in? Where did you see it all?
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. I'd say they're marginally, or they are still the more talented side. They had the more experience, but we probably played the better cricket throughout. We felt like a team on an upward curve. They felt like a team starting to become on a downward curve. 2-all's probably about right.
Player of the series, well, it was Chris Woakes. I mean, Chris Woakes was sensational, but I think you can make arguments for Mark Wood.
I'd make arguments for Creepy Crawley.
Yeah.
I think the pressure that he came into the series under, to be England's top run scorer, to set the statement that he did hitting the first ball for 4 and continuing like that throughout the series.
Oh man,
Yeah.
answered all his critics, Crawley, and really now I think people will sit back and realise what the guy's capable of.
Yeah.
I thought for Australia, I thought Mitchell Starc and Pat Cummins were fantastic.
Yeah.
Cummins had spells, I think, where the game sort of got away from him a little bit, but this real ability to sort of put in England under pressure. And what I loved about his captaincy, and I have to admire him for this, because he obviously, he seems like every breath he took, he came under scrutiny for things, but really this kind of Flintoff-esque of grabbing the ball and actually, when things aren't going the way, taking the responsibility, not hiding in the outfield a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Almost. There's so many people saying this is Smith's team. Smith's obviously captain this side, but I saw a real sense of leadership in his bowling.
Yeah, I thought he was brilliant at times throughout this series with the ball. He was. I said to you on the final day, we've got to get Cummins out here. He's been a real thorn in our side all series with the bat. Particularly if we think back to Edgbaston.
Yeah.
You can't knock Cummins, particularly the way that he operates in the media. He just flat bats everything.
Yeah. Big Test cricket advocate as well, obviously. It's kind of almost like Stokes has put the emphasis on how he feels that himself and his Australian teammates have got a bit of responsibility with this, which, fair play to them both. They put on a great show, haven't they?
Yeah, I think Starc as well. I often think Starc's underrated. He's kind of
he's labelled as a bit as not effective in England, which
and
has
I think that's
kind of been a bit of a myth this
season. He's
season,
the one that I'm scared of the most.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? When he's left arm,
there's a wicket ball there, isn't there? Yeah.
With our kind of tail, bowling bounces at Ali, bowling bounces at Brook, you're thinking he's the one who could really kind of run through us now.
For sure, yeah.
I think he gets a bad rap. I thought he had a really good series as well.
Coming to what, I guess, not to be over too harsh, but I guess people that probably you expected to do better and didn't do better. We'll start probably with England. The obvious ones, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Only taking 4 wickets, Jimmy Anderson. Obviously, you surround yourself with cricket people throughout this Ashes series, and the kind of feel was almost apathetic amongst English fans. They kind of didn't enjoy seeing it. They can see bowlers struggle, but it's not. We just spoke about Broad, haven't we, about wanting to go on a high. There's times where it really felt a bit helpless for Jimmy Anderson out there, didn't it?
Yeah, he averaged 85 with the ball across the series. I think he had the best economy of the bowlers across the series. So I suppose you could say that he does a bit of a holding role for us.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't good enough, really, is it, for a player of that standard Ashes series?
And they backed him, didn't they, as well?
Yeah.
Old Trafford playing him.
The Oval playing him. I wanted Josh Tongan for the Oval.
Many people wanted Josh Tongan. You think we'll see more of Josh Tongan now? There's a vacancy in the bowling department. But yeah, I also thought Ollie Robinson I backed Ollie Robinson to be England's leading wicket taker. Struggled, I think, for his consistency of pace. Often clocked around 77, 79. I know his game isn't built on sort of brute pace, is it? But, I think him himself would have liked to have made a bit more of an impact. I think he'd struggled with fitness coming into this Test series, honey. I think he had that ankle injury lingering there, whether that's affected him as much. But, I'm sure we'll see Ollie Robinson. The system back him a lot, don't they? They like Robinson. But what do you think? Probably unfulfilled slightly?
There is this kind of lingering trend with Robinson that his fitness can drop off the face of a cliff pretty quickly. I don't know whether that's a injury thing, whether there's a level of professionalism that he could improve. There's obviously been rumours about that in the past with Robinson. I think it's just one to keep an eye on, really. He didn't have a great series. He does take his wickets at a good average, but sometimes it just looks pedestrian. It looks quite county. But Mohamed Abbas can be like that. He's got a brilliant Test record. I think Robinson will be all right. He'll go to India, won't he? He'll be back around next summer. Wasn't his best series. Moving on to Australia.
They deem this man as the sort of the distinguisher to Bazball in Scott Boland.
Yeah.
We watched him at the Oval, didn't we?
Yeah.
We weren't watching the World Test Championship. Really good day that. And he looked on the money, didn't he?
Yeah.
I thought this guy's going to be a handful. England seemed to pick Scott Boland, I thought it took a couple of tests. I mean, friends of mine said, well, he's not bowling badly, but I thought out of all the fast bowlers, I thought England felt most at ease when Boland was bowling.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think the bowlers that really succumb to the Bazball approach are your Hazelwoods and your Bolands that are line and length bowlers.
Yeah.
Have less of the white ball skills than like a Starc or a Cummins might have.
Yeah.
And Boland falls really bang centre into that kind of red ball specialist. and got exposed really from that. I think he'll probably
feature. Yeah.
continue. He'll probably have a brilliant winter, won't he? Probably go back to
He's one of those.
Australia.
He kind of is almost. I always dubbed sort of Bowen as like the Milan of sort of Australia, really, where it's kind of like, can you just sort of fail so we can get somebody else in, but you don't fail that much. He's so consistent. It's just whether that kind of, obviously got off to a dream start, swept up a really sorry England, didn't he, in the Ashes when we travelled over there in that Void series. But it kind of felt like, it just this time didn't go his way, and everyone has to sort of end a purple patch, don't they, at some point?
Yeah.
And coming into this series, the Ashes is as competitive it gets in Test match cricket. Many bowlers have come here, and not sort of had the series that they want. So Scott Boland's at an age now. Will we see him at the next England Ashes? Probably not. Will we see him feature for Australia? We probably will.
It's one of them, innit? You have a good start to your Test career.
Yeah.
Harry Brook was averaging 80 before this series. Now he averages 60.
Yeah.
Boland's probably similar to that. Is averaging 15 with the ball before this series. Probably now averages 24.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad Test record.
Mm-hmm.
He'll probably be Hazelwood's understudy, won't he, in Australia?
Sure. Finally, Cam Green. I mean, I think I was expecting more from Cam
He was
Green.
a big disappointment, wasn't he?
I looked very nervous, I thought, at the time, Cam Green.
I don't think it was.
First Ashes series in England.
Yeah, it reminded me of Bell in 2005, maybe a little bit early for such an intense series for a young lad.
His best part of his game was probably fielding.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's brilliant
Gully.
there, isn't he? Yeah. And you almost saw that at times when England would play like a flashy shot through the gully and it'd go flying past Mitchell Marsh.
Race, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Mitchell Marsh, and you think, thank God Cam Green's not in there. But I think Mitch Marsh deserves to be have faith put in him rather than Green for now. He's had a decent series. He seems like a good bloke as well. Not that like makes any difference, but
Bolton ties in the Marsh family, so we'll support Mitch. I mean, Cam Green's going to be knocking around a while, isn't he? I think first time in England, get it under his spell, get out his system. The Australians love him, don't they?
Yeah.
He's going to be in this team for a long time, so I'm sure he'll develop his game. The common phrase throughout this sort of series, Bot, was 2005. It is the cornerstone of every comparable Ashes series in the UK. I personally think this series was better than 2005. I've got some kind of thoughts around it and how it was different and how how I feel it's almost opened up a new chapter in Ashes cricket. But where do you stand on this?
I don't know whether I'm steeped in nostalgia that I don't think it is as good as 05 because I don't think the cricket on display was quite as good. I don't think the players were quite as good and at their peak. So you had peak Flintoff, peak Warne, peak McGrath, Peterson arriving onto the scene. Maybe I'll look back in the fullness of time and think this one was better. This one was closer.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the cricket was always at the same high standard.
I wonder whether this was a changing of the guard because there's moments in like you look at Edgbaston, you look at Lords, and I said this to you where after we lost the Lords Test match, I looked at you and said, "Is this going to be the series where it rewrites all of the sort of?" I know Stuart Broad had like a fairy tale ending, but like the English sort of home form kind of fairy tale outcome where they still managed to pull it over the line. Australia, a significantly better team. Ben Stokes finds something magic. Australia, the better team. Freddie Flintoff pulls something out the bag. I wonder whether this was the change of the guard where actually Australia now actually overcome all of those, sort of Ashes demons, if you like. And it's the series in which where the roles are reversed a little bit and whether that is we're entering a new era of where Australia overcome England. But at the same time, it kind of felt like we've seen such obviously seismic changes in Test match cricket now where we've got a real gulf between the top three and the rest of the nations. And we just cut at the stage now where England are on a little bit of an upslope. Australia are a hardened Test team. Was it just sort of England rising the weight level and then two people going at it? And that's where we found ourselves. That's why I've distanced it from 2005 because I see 2005 as a big David and Goliath kind of thing.
Yeah.
I see this as kind of like a little bit like a rising power, an existing power, just going at it, and taking a bit of lumps out of each other.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't
like Sugar Ray Leonard going up the boxing categories.
Do you think that this England side would beat the 2005 Australia side?
Don't think so. No.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think how we were a bit sloppy in this series. There were all the drops and everything else.
England took everything in 05, didn't they?
Well,
Well,
Peterson famously dropped stuff, but ultimately, yeah, they were right on it.
anytime there was an opening or a gap where
they
England
got through it.
they got through it, didn't they? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Whereas I don't think this side were quite as ruthless as that 2005 side. However, maybe I'm just in mourning from the Old Trafford reign. Is if this had gone to the Oval at 2-2,
Yeah,
the atmosphere around that series would have been incredible.
ecstatic. Yeah.
So it's hard to balance, I suppose.
But it does feel like the series that almost could have been in many ways.
Yeah.
I think it was still brilliant.
Yeah.
I still think it was as good as or better than what we expected.
Yeah.
It just missed that crescendo, didn't it, because of the rain?
Yeah, and if I think 2005 holds a strong place in my heart because it was 10, 11 years old at the time. There'll probably be 10, 11-year-olds now who've just watched that Ashes series who are suddenly absolutely enamoured in Test cricket.
That's good.
And they'll talk back to the 2023 Ashes.
Yeah.
And that's what you want, really. One thing that's been going around on Twitter is you combined...
Are you on Twitter? Are you big into it?
Well, I get WhatsApps telling me what's
chat.
on Twitter, and then I reply to them, and to join combined 2005-23 side, who would you pick for England?
What combined?
Of the two series, 2005 and this series just gone.
Yeah,
you combined England side.
I've seen this. I've seen this bandied about. I think on Crawley's sort of. I mean, God, you have Strauss and Trescothick, don't you? It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on the performance in that
series. Well,
yeah.
you couldn't not pick Crawley, could you? Because of the series. I think you have Trescothick because he was fairly consistent. You're free. You probably have to put Root there, don't you? If Stokes is your captain,
put Stokes though, because he did bat 3.
Yeah, we'll put square pegs in round.
No, because your rule could be they've got to have played that position in the series. So Stokes could bat 3.
Yeah,
Root's 4.
Peterson's got a
Peterson's 5.
Player with Brook.
Yeah,
you'd obviously have. I think you'd probably have Geraint Jones over Bairstow, would you? Keeping. For keeping's sake, would England be in a better position if they'd kept? I mean, Bairstow came into his own, I suppose, towards the end of the series, didn't he?
Bairstow got 2 78s and he got a 99.
Yeah, albeit in favourable sort of. Well, it's a different skill, is that I suppose pressing on the game.
And I don't think Jones kept. I think he dropped a couple in that series.
He's facing quicker bowlers, isn't he? A lot of swing in that series, wasn't there? And lots of opportunity, lots of
All right, you're going Jones. I'm going Bairstow.
I'm passionate about Jones.
Right, Flint Austin.
Yeah.
And then who are your 4 bowlers left?
I think Wokes has got to play, hasn't he?
Wokes.
Oh God, no. Simon Jones bowled really well in the Ashes.
I'd have Jones in there.
Flintoff's already in, isn't he?
Yeah, you've got 2 spots left.
Can I have Mark Wood in?
Can I have Mark Wood in, and then
probably pick Ali, wouldn't you, over Giles?
Yeah, you've got to go Ali over Giles. Yeah, and you've left Broad out.
You could. That's another one. You could probably get 3 or 4 sides out of this and still, once you've tinkered a little bit. Interesting conversation.
If you wanted to get Broad in, you could say Root got 7 wickets at 28 in this series. He's my spinner, and you can get Broad in, but it's a bit of a shoe-in. Yeah, I think
you like these sort of games, don't you?
Well,
so you get to sleep.
Keeps me alive.
We're obviously now we're in the sort of the post. I was describing it to you at the start of the show as like kind of like an end of a birthday, or end of a Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day, isn't it?
You feel like the 100's on, and we've nothing against the 100. It's on. It's just cricket, isn't it? And we've got a long time to go till any Test match cricket.
Yeah.
I think England go to India, and I think Australia has the home series against Pakistan and the West Indies. A little look at where both of these sides now go. I think that they're rightfully, obviously, still remain in the top 3. I think India, Australia, and England is justified, isn't it, as the 3 best Test teams in the world.
Yeah,
we've said goodbye to David Warner in England for sure. I think he's going to have a bit of a sort of an oval ceremony himself, isn't he, in Australia next year?
Right.
But can we just have a little word on David Warner, because that's another Ashes legend, I think, that's departed. He came over to these shows, I remember, as this sort of snappy, kind of poison spitting Aussie that punched Joe Root in the bar, came in at 5, booed to hell. Many years sort of lived up to that pantomime villain, and we've seen a more mellow David Warner in recent years, a TikTok in IPL sort of smiley David Warner, nice guy, laughing at his own sort of dismays of being dismissed by Stuart Broad. But that is another character that I'm going to miss.
Yeah, I think that at times, particularly this series, and there's been times where it's definitely gone too far, but I've seen Australians, I think, get a little bit too het up about the English crowds and the booing and the chanting and saying it's going too far. I think Warner was one who actually at sometimes really got it and knew that it's just a joke. Nobody really thinks that he's a bad guy. It's just cricket.
I think he's done a lot of improving as a bloke over the years. He's changed his image a lot.
But even so, like in some ways, like sledging. I know, like there's a lot of Australians who think he was a bit of a knobhead early in his career, but sledging, bit of sandpaper on the ball. It's not good, but it's not bad, is it? Exactly.
Yeah.
It's only cricket, and I think that therefore, kind of the English crowds and the and Warner had a bit of a nice relationship as it came to the end, where you kind of loved to hate him. He was the pantomime villain. He didn't really score many runs in England. He was just there to celebrate a great slips catch, pump his fists, give him the histrionics. He was there broad over this era. That's why it's quite fitting that they had such a rivalry on the field, because
big boots to fill.
Yeah,
big boots to fill, and that's I guess where Australia go next, because they're rightfully World Test champions, but I think they're on the horizon of a few blank spots in that starting 11 coming soon.
I think that's Warner's probably just done enough, Anthony, to cling on with his fingertips. If he wants that Sydney Test match to go out into retirement, he's probably just about got it, because Marcus Harris is nothing on David Warner, really, is he?
Well, one of those. It's one of those. South Africa suffered with this. It's the drawbacks of longevity, isn't it? You hold the place of somebody else who's waiting to be, and then they come totally unprepared for it almost. So then, before you know it, you've got an England situation where it's taken England look like they finally got some openers, obviously set in stone. But how long has it taken England to the mad stat about obviously when they lost Strauss about having to find someone to partner Cook? God, they must have gone through it. But was it something crazy like 20 players?
Yeah. Well, they'll have to manage it now, Australia, won't they? Because they could have a real black hole if Warner, Khawaja, Smith, some of the bowlers decided that they'd had enough over the space of 18 months. You would be struggling to put a good test side together there.
So I think you'll find the Aussies will experiment in the coming years. They've not got anything to write home about from a test series. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, where I don't think they've got an Ashes series or India coming up anytime soon, which I think they'll really know is that the real true test for them. So, the home series next year, don't be surprised to see them blood some younger players in there, some players who have been short of opportunities. But I think their sights in Test match cricket will be obviously retaining the World Test Championship, and perhaps even coming up against England in that, which we know, that'd be
really fitting, wouldn't it? If this bloody computer's doing its stuff again.
Sort it out, and I'll talk around the back.
That'd be really fitting, wouldn't it? If in 2025 or whenever the next World Test Championship final is,
where would it be though? Would it only be something like Ahmedabad?
It's at Lords.
Again, we'll have that, won't we? Mind you, we'd always lose at Lords.
So that'd be the problem, wouldn't it?
Anyway, England, I think. What's been really exciting about this is I've enjoyed, how the responsibility has been shared amongst all the team. Everyone's chipped in a little bit, which is really good.
Yeah.
Decisions have paid off. Rightfully, you can say that. I'm not too heartbroken about 2-2. I think I probably would have taken that at the start of the series. I want to retain that Ashes carrier at some point, but I think England's day will come. And Brendan McCullum's come out of a really interesting comment, because I wondered, I always think about McCullum. Is it a phase? He's new into the job. He always seems very relaxed. How long does he actually want to manage his projects? And he just came out and said, "We've so much more to achieve." And I think generally England now, the way they play and the confidence they've installed themselves, I think they're looking at India and thinking, can they mount a surprise over there?
Yeah, it's a big ask, but they've conquered every ask that's been thrown at them so far. It'll be a huge series that, I suppose. They've got a nice space now to go away, get the tactics sorted, try and find some spinners. That'll be a tough job.
You feel like Rehan is time to be put into the squad?
Yeah.
Although he's not doing a lot of bowling, is he?
No, he's not bowling much for Leicester. We'll obviously discuss that closer to the time, but I think what's really positive is it feels like England have almost cracked the batting. Now it's about going off and cracking the bowling. I'd like to see more pace. Mark Wood's shown the way for me. His high quality, high pace bowling is the way to win Test matches.
And don't be surprised to see sort of the ECB or the England setup prescribe that into counties. We're looking for pace.
Yeah.
What can you do for us? What can you produce for us? What can you find across your respective catchment area? Do you know what I mean?
And then keep them fit.
Keep them fit. Yeah. Look at can we improve the sports science in that? Obviously, so much to unpack from this. Where are we at as a podcast now?
So we're having a break.
We're going to have a break, aren't we?
A couple of weeks.
Talking to you is tiring.
Yeah, likewise. We can leave the 100, pick it up a bit further down the competition.
Might have a beer and watch that on the live show, maybe.
Yeah, we could do a bit of a watch along, maybe. A 100 semi-final or a 100 final, something that could be good. Yeah, and then we've obviously got the World Cup coming up, so there's some white ball cricket before then.
Yeah, we'll keep people busy. A few guest appearances while we're there.
Get some
interviews. Get guests back on the show, get into some of cricket's biggest topics, as we say on this, moving the conversation along. I just want to say, but on behalf of throughout this Ashes series, the live shows that we've done, we're a very modest cricket podcast, aren't we, in regards to the budget we spend and obviously the commitment we both have alongside our full-time jobs. But the comments people say, we get occasional people we know less so, come up to us and say, really enjoyed this, or we tuned into your live session. We really appreciate it. This is a modest hobby. It's something we enjoy doing as friends, and hopefully we can continue and we can keep on, doing this sort of format to kind of keep in touch with the game. And this is how we consume our cricket, isn't it?
Yeah, well said. Don't think there's anything more to add. Go on, see us out.
Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you very soon.
Cheers.